So imagine for a second that you are planning your very first factory sourcing visit to Vietnam. You have spent months preparing for this.
Oh, yeah, you've got all your spreadsheets lined up.
Exactly. You have your spec sheets, your financial models, and you are just totally ready to negotiate some serious manufacturing contracts. So your sourcing agent books the itinerary, and naturally, you fly right into Ho Chi Minh City.
Right, which the industry usually just calls HCMC.
Right, HCMC. And you step out of the sliding glass doors at the airport, and the reality of legacy supply chains just hits you instantly. I mean, you are hit by 40-degree heat, and before you even get into a vehicle, you are looking at absolute gridlock traffic.
Just a total wall of cars.
Yes. And you check your phone and realize that your first factory meeting, the one you flew 15 hours for, is a grueling 2-hour commute from the airport. By the time your whole trip wraps up, you will have spent 70% of your time just sitting in the back of a car.
Staring at taillights.
Literally just staring at taillights. And only 30% of your time actually walking factory floors or doing any real business. It is a completely draining experience.
The irony of that whole scenario is that it has basically become the accepted cost of doing business. I mean, for people operating on an outdated map of global manufacturing anyway.
They just think it's normal.
Exactly. They assume that because a region is this massive manufacturing hub, the friction of getting there, moving around, and getting goods out is just an unavoidable hurdle. And something you just have to jump over to get the lowest price.
Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring a massive strategic shift in global manufacturing and sourcing that challenges that exact assumption. We are pulling apart a really fascinating 2025 guide that details the sourcing landscape in Da Nang and central Vietnam.
It's a great read.
It really is. And our mission today is to decode why the smart money-like, the major global brands and these highly agile manufacturers, why they are quietly packing up and moving their operations 500 kilometers north of those traditional legacy hubs.
Because the core revelation in the source material we are looking at is that a vastly superior operational sweet spot actually exists now. That deeply stressful, congested experience in Ho Chi Minh City, it doesn't have to be the reality of sourcing in Southeast Asia anymore.
The center of gravity for efficiency has totally shifted. But before we explore the mechanics of that new center of gravity, we need to understand how the old model broke down. Why did HCMC become this sort of trap for sourcing teams in the first place?
Well, if we look back at the window from 2010 to about 2018, establishing operations down there was a total no-brainer.
Oh, for sure. It was the undisputed heavyweight champion of Vietnamese manufacturing. Everybody was going there.
Right. And what's fascinating here is how market maturity inherently creates operational friction. When a region becomes the undisputed heavyweight for a decade, it naturally attracts a massive influx of foreign direct investment.
So all the big players show up.
Exactly. Multinational corporations rush in. They build these massive mega factories, the initial infrastructure is laid down, and for a few years, the whole ecosystem functions at an incredibly high level. But a physical geographic location can only handle so much density before it reaches a tipping point.
And our source data points out that by 2025, that maturity absolutely turned into a huge liability. I mean, the numbers over just a 5-year period are striking. Labor costs in HCMC rose by 25 to 30%.
Which is a massive jump for manufacturing margins.
Huge. And industrial land prices didn't just inch up, they completely tripled.
Yeah.
I actually like to think of a supply chain network a bit like internet bandwidth. HCMC is essentially this massive fiber optic cable that worked perfectly until, 10,000 corporate servers all plugged into it at the exact same time.
That's a perfect way to put it. The data, or in this case, the actual manufacturing capability, isn't the problem.
Right, the factories are still good.
Yeah, the factories are great, but the bandwidth is totally choked. The physical infrastructure simply cannot process the sheer volume of business trying to push through it. And those physical constraints dictate the financial realities.
Because everyone is fighting for the same resources.
Exactly. When thousands of massive companies are locked in this brutal bidding war for the exact same square footage of industrial park space, and they are all competing to hire from the exact same pool of skilled workers, operational costs inevitably skyrocket.
It stops being about who has the best product.
Right. It stops being about the product and starts being about who can outspin the competition just to keep the lights on. And that overcrowding just cascades down to the workers and the executives who end up facing those 3 to 4 hours of daily commuting just to get to those expensive facilities.
Which naturally brings us to the alternative. If HCMC is that overloaded network, we need to look at the new dedicated fiber line that all these companies are switching to. So let's look at the actual math behind this migration to Da Nang and central Vietnam.
The direct wage comparisons for 2025 tell a very clear story about these regional economic phases. Up in the north, in Hanoi, you are looking at monthly labor costs of roughly $200 to $250.
Okay.
Down in HCMC, it sits a bit higher, between $220 to $280. Da Nang, however, occupies this highly strategic middle ground. It's sitting right at $180 to $220 a month.
Wow. So to put that into perspective for your own operations, the source model is a real-world scenario. If you are a brand placing a 50,000 unit annual order, you are looking at over $125,000 in pure labor cost savings.
So from making the geographic shift.
Yes, simply by utilizing the Da Nang wage advantage rather than placing that exact same order in the South. I mean, for a mid-sized brand, that is a massive amount of capital that just stays right on the balance sheet.
It really is. And that margin is driven by a very unique demographic window. Central Vietnam possesses a much younger, less saturated workforce.
Yeah.
Because the region hasn't been completely picked over by massive global conglomerates for the last 15 years, the power dynamic is totally different.
How so? Like, the factories are treating workers differently.
Exactly. The factories in Central Vietnam are actively competing on quality to attract and retain the best workers, rather than just treating them as this endless replaceable commodity like you sometimes see in overcrowded hubs.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because usually, in global manufacturing, if you locate a pocket of labor that is noticeably cheaper, it implies a serious operational trade-off.
Right. People assume cheaper means worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It normally means you are dealing with a workforce that can only handle very basic assembly, or there is a major lack of specialized machinery. The logic is that it's cheaper because they simply cannot execute complex manufacturing.
But the data thoroughly disproves that traditional assumption. The industrial ecosystem in central Vietnam is remarkably sophisticated, largely because it was built later. They are utilizing modern manufacturing theories rather than those legacy megafactory models.
So they learn from the mistakes of the older hubs.
Precisely. Just look at the apparel and textile sector. The region hosts over 200 active mills. And they are not just churning out low-grade, disposable fast fashion. These are facilities fully equipped to produce GOTS-certified goods.
Wait, GOTS certified? Remind me what that stands for again.
That stands for the Global Organic Textile Standard, which has incredibly stringent compliance rules. And they are doing that alongside highly regulated fair trade production.
Wait, let me stop you right there. You're saying they have 200 mills doing complex, organic, and fair trade work? But the source also mentions they offer minimum order quantities, or MOQs, of just 150 to 300 units.
Yeah, which is practically unheard of in traditional hubs.
It is. How does that mechanism actually work? Usually, a facility running certified fair trade organic cotton requires massive minimums just to justify turning on the machines and retooling the line.
The mechanism completely comes down to factory design.
Yeah.
The legacy factories in the South were built for massive volume.
Yeah.
Producing millions of the exact same T-shirt for big box retailers.
Yeah, the huge runs.
Yeah, and retooling those giant lines takes days, which is exactly why their MOQs are so high. But the facilities in central Vietnam were built much more recently, and they were specifically designed for modularity and agility. They utilize smaller, cross-trained production cells.
Okay, so they can pivot faster.
Much faster.
Mm.
This means they can switch from producing a high-end organic cotton hoodie to a complex technical athletic garment in a matter of hours, not days. This modular design is exactly what allows them to profitably offer those extremely low MOQs of 150 units.
I mean, if you're a mid-sized brand listening to this, that agility is everything. It is literally the difference between safely testing a new product line in the market versus bankrupting your company by holding thousands of units of unsold inventory in a warehouse just because the factory forced a massive minimum on you.
It completely de-risks the launch process.
Absolutely. And beyond apparel, the source notes a highly capable light manufacturing electronics sector in Da Nang and Quang Nam, meeting strict global standards. Plus, just 30 kilometers south in Hoi An, you have a globally recognized center for premium artisanal handicrafts.
You're talking really high-end stuff.
Yeah. High-end lacquerware, complex silk textiles, and incredible wood carvings.
The capabilities are broad, and the quality is absolutely world-class. But, saving $125,000 on labor and keeping your inventory lean with low MOQs, all of that is entirely useless if those products are trapped on a loading dock unable to actually leave the country.
Okay, that is the perfect pivot. Because the physical manufacturing is really only half the equation. We need to look at the velocity advantage. How does a slightly less mature region actually get these products onto the ocean and into the hands of consumers faster than the established heavyweight hubs?
To understand that, we have to look at the physical bottleneck at the legacy ports. The logistical situation at the HCMC ports is severely compromised. The guide details that HCMC has 50-plus container ships moving through daily.
And while 50 ships sounds like really robust economic activity, the math reveals it is actually a massive bottleneck. The source says that volume creates 7 to 10 days of container queue times.
Just waiting to be loaded.
Just waiting. And during peak holiday seasons, that queue easily spikes to over 15 days. Imagine your seasonal inventory goods that have a very strict expiration date on their relevance, just sitting in a metal box on a dock for 2 solid weeks while your competitors are already stocking shelves.
That kind of delay totally paralyzes cash flow. You have paid the factory, but you cannot sell the goods yet. Now compare that to the mechanics of Da Nang's port system. Da Nang processes about 10 to 15 ships daily.
Which sounds smaller, but
because of their spatial design, and the fact that commercial trucks don't have to navigate through the dead center of a dense metropolis to reach the docks, there is absolutely zero congestion. The queue time is a highly predictable 2 to 3 days.
the source highlights a phenomenal operational reality here, and I love this example. A container ship departing Da Nang on a Wednesday will physically reach its destination port in another country before a ship loaded in HCMC on that exact same day even clears the local traffic queue to reach open water.
It's wild.
The Da Nang cargo is halfway across the ocean, while the HCMC cargo is basically still circling the parking lot waiting for a spot.
And that velocity extends beyond ocean freight to air freight capabilities as well. Da Nang International Airport maintains direct flight routes globally: Singapore, South Korea, and increasingly the U.S.
Right, because it's a major tourist hub, too.
Exactly. Because it operates highly efficient passenger routes, smart companies utilize the belly cargo space of those passenger flights. This makes air freight 30 to 40% cheaper than fighting for dedicated freighter space down in HCMC.
And when you are developing new products, you are constantly flying prototypes and samples back and forth. The guide shows that sample shipping in Da Nang runs about $400 to $500, compared to $600 to $800 in HCMC.
Which really adds up over a year.
For an active brand, that saves thousands of dollars annually just on moving little cardboard boxes of samples, but the real metric is time. It cuts your time to market by 5 to 7 days.
Which gives you a massive edge.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though. If we are broadcasting the mathematical superiority of the Da Nang port and all the agile companies are migrating there, won't that smaller port instantly get overwhelmed? Aren't we just watching the exact same bandwidth problem recreate itself 500 kilometers north?
It's a valid concern. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the regional government's data proves they are proactively addressing that exact threat. They are not just resting on the current zero congestion metrics and hoping for the best.
So they are actively expanding.
Hugely. The Da Nang government is actively executing a massive infrastructure expansion, injecting over $2 billion through 2028.
Wow. $2 billion is a staggering amount of capital for regional infrastructure.
It is, and the allocation of that capital is what prevents the future bottleneck. They are not just pouring concrete to make the parking lot bigger, so to speak. They are investing in deep water dredging to handle much larger vessel classes, fully automated gantry cranes, and sophisticated digital queue management systems.
So it's a smart expansion.
Very smart. This investment is specifically designed to double their capacity by 2027, making it the second largest port in Vietnam, measured in TEUs, which is essentially just industry speak for your standard 20-foot shipping container. They are literally installing the processing power to handle the future influx before the influx has a chance to break the system.
Okay, so we've established that the cargo moves faster and cheaper, but global sourcing isn't just an exercise in moving metal boxes across an ocean. It requires moving the actual people who are architecting these deals.
Right, the buyers,
Yes.
the QC teams, the executives.
Exactly. And the source material makes a really fascinating pivot here away from macro logistics and focuses heavily on the deeply human, boots-on-the-ground experience of conducting business.
I love this part because the human element is arguably the most miscalculated metric on a corporate balance sheet. Companies track the cost of raw materials down to the fraction of a cent, but they rarely calculate the financial fallout of an exhausted, burned-out sourcing team making critical business decisions.
Well, let's compare the ground logistics that cause that burnout. We mentioned the commute times earlier. In Da Nang, you are looking at a highly predictable 30 to 90-minute commute from the airport or your hotel right to the factory floors.
Nice and easy.
Right. But in HCMC, you are trapped for an hour and a half to 3 hours each way. And the financial cost of that friction is wild. In HCMC, premium ride services cost $40 to $60 an hour. You will easily burn $300 to $500 on ground transportation alone for a standard 3-day trip.
Which is crazy. Now contrast that with central Vietnam, where the standard practice is hiring a professional, English-speaking private driver with a dedicated vehicle for $25 to $35 for the entire day.
Wait, for the whole day?
The entire day. So your total ground logistics for a 3-day trip dropped to roughly $75 to $100.
That is a massive difference. And to really crystallize what this means for a sourcing team, the guide breaks down a sample 4-day itinerary in Da Nang. And it reads less like a grueling corporate obligation and more like a highly strategic, almost pleasant offsite.
Yeah, it's incredibly streamlined.
So day 1, your team lands, the private driver handles the logistics seamlessly, and because the industrial parks are integrated right with highway access, you actually complete 3 different factory audits by 5 p.m. on your arrival day.
Which is unheard of if you have to fight city traffic.
Right. Then day 2 focuses on the Thanh Hoa textile cluster. Because the facilities are clustered purposefully, usually only 45 minutes apart, you can easily audit 3 more factories. You finish up at 4 p.m., and the itinerary suggests heading to the UNESCO World Heritage Old Town of Hoi An to decompress.
Such a great spot. And then day 3 is dedicated to the premium artisanal factories located right in Hoi An, reviewing high-end silk or lacquerware in the morning.
Right.
By the afternoon, all the heavy lifting is done. You take your team to the coast, find a nice cafe, handle your emails, and finalize the trip with a river dinner. Day 4 leaves time for one optional morning factory visit before a smooth afternoon departure.
So the mathematical output of that Da Nang itinerary is 6 to 8 highly productive factory audits. But this raises an important question about negotiation psychology, because the real ROI is the state of mind of the team.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, think about your own business trips. Imagine trying to hash out the fine print of a complex million-dollar manufacturing contract after you have just spent 2 hours fighting for a cab in the pouring rain, breathing in exhaust fumes. Your brain is just in survival mode.
So just want to go to sleep.
Right. Now compare that to negotiating that exact same contract after a smooth, scenic drive where you had 45 quiet minutes in the back of an air-conditioned car to review your notes and align your strategy.
It changes everything. An exhausted brain makes concessions. A clear brain finds leverage. In HCMC, out of a 4-day trip, your team essentially loses 2 entire working days just sitting in traffic. In Da Nang, they get 3.5 days of highly focused, clear-minded relationship building.
And in long-term manufacturing partnerships, where nuanced communication prevents really costly mistakes, that human element compounds into massive financial advantages over time.
It pays for itself immediately.
So we have detailed the lower labor costs, the agile manufacturing cells offering low MOQs, the automated ports with 0 congestion, and the stark difference in the human experience. But we need to look at the historical data to ensure this isn't just, some optimistic projection.
Right. We need to look at what's actually happening. And the 10-year economic indicators detailed in the source remove any speculation. Between 2015 and 2025, Central Vietnam's export value surged from $4.2 billion to $17.3 billion.
That represents a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of 15.8%. According to the baseline data, that means the central region is expanding 3 times faster than HCMC.
3 times faster. And returning to our discussion on port velocity, during that exact same 10-year explosion in growth, Da Nang's port volume, measured in those 20-foot equivalent containers, increased by a staggering 575%.
That is massive volume.
It is. And the critical mechanism to understand is that they absorbed a nearly 600% increase in volume without triggering any congestion. The infrastructure successfully scaled right alongside the demand.
But the guide makes a very crucial point here. You cannot just drop a pin on a map, fly to Da Nang, and expect to magically unlock 15% growth and 0 logistical friction. The linchpin to making this whole thing work is local ecosystem integration. You absolutely need partners who are physically embedded in the region.
Yeah, the source leans heavily on the necessity of local players, specifically highlighting firms like Vietnam Direct Sourcing, or VDS. Now, while we should obviously view any single report's highlighted vendors with a critical eye, the underlying math of their geographic strategy is undeniable.
Because of where they set up.
Exactly. They did not just open a small satellite office in central Vietnam. They placed their entire headquarters directly in Da Nang, right in the Hai Châu district.
So what does this all actually mean for the listener? Why does the physical address of your sourcing partner matter quite so much?
It completely dictates the speed of problem solving. When your sourcing partner is part of the local fabric, they understand the subtle shifts in local labor dynamics or material shortages way before they become industry headlines. Quality control is ultimately about physical presence.
Like actually being in the room.
Right. If a seam is off by a single millimeter on a production run, an agent based in Da Nang is literally a 30-minute drive away.
Oh.
They walk onto the factory floor, inspect the machine, and correct the issue immediately.
Okay, and if they aren't local?
If your agent is based down in HCMC trying to manage a Da Nang facility remotely, they are sending emails, requesting blurry photos, and eventually having to book a flight. You are injecting massive delays and friction into a problem that requires immediate physical intervention.
It is basically the difference between hiring a guide who skimmed a Wikipedia page about a mountain and hiring a guide who has hiked that exact trail every day for 10 years.
That's exactly it.
Looking at the aggregate data from this deep dive, the narrative is crystal clear. Replacing the skyrocketing costs, the suffocating physical traffic, and the gridlocked cargo ports of HCMC with Da Nang is not just some aesthetic preference. It is structurally and mathematically superior.
It really is the blueprint moving forward.
It provides the agility modern brands require, and it is clearly where the future of Southeast Asian manufacturing is being drawn.
You know, the most compelling takeaway from all this data is really just a shift in perspective. The question for global supply chains is no longer whether central Vietnam has the capability to be a viable alternative. The $2 billion port investments, the sophisticated organic textile mills, the labor demographics, they have decisively answered that.
The proof is already there.
Right. The actual question is why any brand that is serious about securing the best margins, maintaining the lowest inventory holds, and ensuring reliable delivery times would continue fighting for scraps in an overcrowded legacy hub.
Which leaves us with a fascinating dynamic to consider as we wrap up today. When a massive business strategy becomes the accepted conventional wisdom like setting up shop in HCMC was back in 2010, it feels incredibly safe. Everyone else in the industry is doing it, so nobody really questions it.
It's the safe bet.
Right. But at what point does blindly following the crowd stop being a safe bet and start becoming your single biggest competitive disadvantage? As you evaluate your own operations and strategies this week, it really makes you wonder, what other areas of your business or even your life are you paying a massive premium for just for the privilege of sitting in traffic with everybody else?